You are listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 346.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. How's everybody doing today? Hope you're all doing well. We are here at the end of April, and it has been quite an eventful month here in Kentucky. Many of you have emailed. As you know, we had some devastating flooding in the state. While I nor my family was personally affected in terms of our home by the flooding, there were many towns in our state that were devastated. And actually, for some of them, this was the second time this year they had a lot of rain. In the western parts of the state, I think somewhere over 12 inches of rain. Our area probably received about 5 or 6. I was actually in Ohio the weekend of the rain on a retreat, and it literally rained all weekend. And as a matter of fact, when we arrived for the retreat, the power was out. So it came on that night, rained all weekend. It was actually a very nice weekend to be away on a retreat because we were indoors and had activities and got to go outside every now and then for a little walk when it was maybe a break between the downpours, but gosh, it rained all weekend. So anyway, thinking of everybody, I think it's one thing that's so interesting about doing this podcast is I just never really know exactly what's going on in your life or in your area related to the weather. People listen from all over the world, so obviously that's hard for me to predict, hard for me to even mention or talk about, but just know that I... every time I sign on to this podcast, thinking of you, my faithful listeners, any new listeners, and I'm just so glad that you're here and that we can enjoy this time together to talk about something that we all love, which is cookbooks. And today I'm going to actually talk about cookbook writing. Hope you've enjoyed our interviews over the past few weeks. I've got some other great ones coming up this spring. But today I want to talk about a topic related to you if you've ever dreamed of writing a cookbook, but the book isn't here yet, like you've just been thinking about it. So you're not alone. And in this installment of my Being a Cookbook Writer, I'm going to share my experience of what I did to move from dreaming about my cookbook to actually writing my cookbook. I'm going to walk you through some daily and weekly routines that help me stay connected to my goal, even in the midst of my busy life. When I wrote my first cookbook, my children were all under the age of 12. And I'm going to also talk about how some really small steps that you might be able to incorporate into your day-to-day life can help you to lead to a finished book, whether that is for your family, to record your legacy recipes that you might want to self-publish, or for a book proposal for a published book that you might want to traditionally publish. So if you're ready to stop waiting and start writing, this episode is for you. Before I get started on my little discussion, though, I want to share with you that if you look below in the show notes, I do have a link to a training all about recipe writing. Recipe writing is foundational for any book that you want to write. Again, whether it's a family cookbook or a cookbook that you are writing for profit. We have to think about things like copyright laws, what makes a recipe yours, can you ask for permission to use someone else's recipe, what's the laws around that, how to write a recipe, what are the parts of a recipe you need to include, how to set up a recipe development and testing system for your cookbook. All of these things I cover in a 5-part training called Recipe Week. So there is a link below in the show notes. And also, in addition to that, I have the option for you to include a template pack where you can collect recipes electronically from your family, or if you're getting submitted recipes for your project, as well as a spreadsheet that I created that I use to keep track of recipes that I'm going to use in my books. So head on over to the show notes. There's a link there called Recipe Week Training, and you can take a look at that and see if that would be beneficial for you. Okay, so let's dive in. Again, the concept of this being a cookbook writer episode is that you have wanted to start a cookbook. Maybe it's a new dream. Maybe it's something that you've been thinking about doing since you've been listening to the show. Maybe it's something you've wanted to do for a long time. You're sitting on a stack of recipes that you know you need to get published or that you want to get published. But the truth is the book is not here yet. It's just living in your head. And you're overthinking about your cookbook, or you're not thinking about it at all. And I know exactly how you feel, because before I wrote my first cookbook, I was in the wanting to start the project stage also. But I always felt like with everything that was going in my life, it was a little bit out of reach. And that's when I realized that if I wanted to actually start this book, I needed to start doing some sort of writing, even in the midst of my everyday life. And one thing that really tipped the scale for me is what I'm going to talk about first. So just to back up for a second, I'm going to give you 4 activities that I incorporated in my day-to-day life to become a cookbook writer. 4 recipe routines that helped me to still to this day be a cookbook writer. Because what happens is that we have to change our behavior or our attitudes or our mindset or our habits in order to become a cookbook author. Because we're not a cookbook author. We obviously don't have the behavior or the habits or the attitudes or the mindset yet, but we have to develop those to become the person that actually writes a cookbook. So the first thing that happened to me was many years ago. I read the book, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and it is all about creativity and creative people on creative journeys. Now, she was, I think, a dancer, maybe ballet, but she talked about the value of 3 things in her life that helped her to always be more creative. And one of the tools that she used and teaches, and maybe you've heard me talk about it before, is called morning pages. It is 3 longhand written pages in a notebook every single day, first thing in the morning. And I have been faithful to this practice for a long time. My morning starts with my coffee that I have set up from the night before, and about an hour of my morning pages and some prayer time and quiet time before I start my day. And during this time, my morning pages led me to thinking more about my cookbook, writing more about my cookbook, and finally setting the goal to write the cookbook proposal within the next year. And every morning during my morning pages time, focusing on writing about my cookbook, writing about the cookbook that I wanted to write, and dreaming about the cookbook that I wanted to write, and keeping my brain focused on the cookbook I wanted to write. Did you know our brains are designed to solve problems? And if you don't give it a problem to solve, it's going to find a problem to solve. For me, that tends to be problems that I think other people in my life might be creating, but that's never true. They're wonderful people in my life. They all do amazing things. It's just that my brain needed something to do. And even when I had children, my brain was like, if it would point out things like, oh, what I thought so-and-so might be not doing correctly, I just decided to give my brain a better job. And that was writing a cookbook. And in my morning pages, every morning, I focused on that goal of writing my cookbook. And my brain loved, obviously, to solve the problem of writing a cookbook because I did it. But just remember that you need to get in the habit of journaling or writing or thinking about your goal of the cookbook somehow on a daily basis. Because if you don't, your brain will switch to something else and focus on something else. So let it think about your cookbook for a while. Give it a nice job and focus on that every day. Now, if you're not in the habit of journaling or morning pages, first of all, I highly recommend it. I think it's been life-changing for me, but you can just as easily in a planner or on your calendar every day think about your goal and what you need to do today to reach that goal, okay? That's number one. Number two, I was in the habit of cooking a meal for our family in the evening. I dedicated home cook, loved the time we spent together around the table. I obviously thought it was important for our health emotionally, as a family, physically, to eat good food, healthy food, so I cooked every night. And on top of this habit of cooking every night, I also got into the habit of documenting everything I cooked. The ingredients I used, how I put things together, steps that I might have taken to make a recipe, and any tips for success for that particular meal, or for shopping, or for cooking, or for cleanup. Whatever I thought of that maybe would help another cook, I wrote it all down. So my habit of documentation, I tagged onto the top of my evening cooking. So whenever you are cooking, which I hope you're doing on a regular basis if you want to write a cookbook, or whenever you're baking, you have to start documenting what you're doing. And it can be just as easy as getting a notebook and a pen and keeping it in your kitchen and keeping track of what you do. Number three, then I had to take the recipes from my notebook and get them typed on my computer. So what I decided to do was to use about a half hour or 45 minutes every day during the week after lunch to type up 2 recipes. Now, you could just do 1 recipe if that's all you have time for. But imagine if you did that every weekday, you could have 20 recipes typed every month. And over the course of 3 months, you could have 60 recipes typed. I think this is the step where the compound effect of just a single recipe a day makes such a big difference at the end of 90 days or even at the end of 30 days. Let's suppose you're even writing a cookbook proposal and you need a 10 recipe sample chapter. You could type the recipes for that in 2 weeks. So I used my daytime because my children were in school. I was working from home. I stopped to eat lunch. I would type my recipes then. And then number 4, the fourth thing that I did is every weekend I committed to carve out an hour or 2 of time to work on my cookbook proposal. Cookbook proposals have about 8 or 9 different sections that most agents or editors want you to send them. And this would be if you're proposing a book to them. Remember, if you're proposing a book to a traditional publisher, you do not need to send your full manuscript. You just need to send a proposal. So I would say, okay, this weekend, I put on my calendar, maybe between the hours of 8 and 11 on a Saturday morning, I'm going to write the cookbook competition section of other books that are similar to the book that I want to write. And then the next weekend, I would set up another time and another section to write. And when you do that, over the course of a couple of months, if you think you have 12 weekends in 90 days, and let's say you work on your proposal for 10 of those 12 weekends, a couple hours on the weekend, you could theoretically get your proposal written in the 90-day period of time. And your recipes written during the week at lunch. So what I'm trying to get you to think about is that if you want to start a cookbook project, you have to start incorporating the writing of it in the day that you're already living. And it was easiest for me if I attached this to things that I was already doing. In the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, he talks about habit stacking. And his habits that really stuck were habits that were called, I think they were called identity habits, but habits that helped him to see himself in a new way. So let's say that he wanted to run a 5K. He would build and stack running habits of putting on your shoes, putting on your running clothes, maybe going out and making it just as easy as possible to run down the street and back. And then he would slowly increase that. But he started to see himself as a runner. And I, through my habit stacking, started to see myself as a cookbook author, as a cookbook writer, because I was actually doing the work, incorporating it into things I was doing every day anyway. So in the morning, when I did my morning pages, I started to focus on writing about my goal of writing a cookbook. In the evening, when I cooked meals for my family, I documented everything that I did. During the weekday, after lunch, I would type 2 recipes. And then in the weekend, I would write sections of my cookbook proposal. And I did it. I wrote my proposal, pitched it to a publisher. They published the book. And then I've gone on since then to write 3 more traditionally published books, another self-published book, it's my Christmas cookie book, which I've talked about, that I taught other students how to do also. And then I've got in my head an idea for a 5th published book, traditionally published book, that I need to write a proposal for as well. So that's my secret, sort of. It's not really a secret. I'm telling you about it, to how I stopped just thinking about my cookbook and started doing it. And it's because I started writing and I realized the power of building habits and the compound effect with doing a little bit of work over the course of time, and how it really does truly build up, rather than thinking that we have to do this whole big thing and change our whole life in order to work in a cookbook project. And the interesting thing about a cookbook is once you invest the time in it, I didn't have to do it forever, because the book is eventually published and you're not actively writing a book anymore, but these habits still are part of who I am. I still do my morning pages. I still think about cookbooks I can write. I still document and write down things that I do in the kitchen. I have a notebook in the kitchen. For example, I did a green curry the other day, with vegetables and tofu in it. And I've shared that with people. I haven't actually typed it up yet, but that's a recipe I can type up and I can use in a book project. And I'll be using blocks of time then to write the cookbook proposal as well. So never underestimate the power of this writing on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis, because when you give yourself the gift of time to write, your book will truly start to come to life. So again, if you are interested in learning more about recipe writing, head on to the show notes. You can see the link there for the Recipe Week training. It's there for you to enjoy. It's an on-demand course, and I hope that it helps you to become the recipe writer that you want to be, answering all the questions again about recipe copyright law, recipe development, recipe writing, and recipe testing. So that is it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green, and until next time, have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.